Have you ever had a nearly death experience? 13 years ago, on September 15, 2009, in Ohio, USA, Romell Broom was brought to the execution chamber. The time has come. His body was fixed to the bed. He was ready for it. However, something unexpected happened. Even though Broom was executed, he did not die. The immortal man. Romell Broom, who was 53 years old at the time, faced execution day. He was sentenced to death in 1984 for the kidnapping and murder of a 14-year-old girl. He maintained his innocence, but DNA testing did not exonerate him, and he spent 24 years in a jail. When he was ready, he was taken to a place that looked like an operating room. His body was fixed to the bed. Actually, in the US, each state has a different way of executing the death penalty. This time, it was the death penalty by drugs, which was the most commonly practiced among them at the time. The drugging death penalty was introduced in the 1990s. They caused death by infusing prisoners with lethal doses of drugs. At the time, it had been introduced in 35 of the 50 US states, including Ohio. 3 drugs were also scheduled to be injected into Broom. When you think of the death penalty, you would imagine hanging or the electric chair. Can a drug kill them right away? Actually, it was not so easy in Broom's case. Broom was tied to the bed. The executioner stuck a needle in his arm. The pain of the needles ran through him, but there was no other changes. Surprised, the executor reinserted the needle. The execution team was impatient to see him just frown a little. Those present looked at each other and said, "This guy, he won't die." The reason he can't die. Impatiently, the executioners repeatedly jabbed the needles into his arm. Still, he was only in pain, and the execution did not proceed. The reason he can't die is because they could not find his blood vessels. The enforcers instructed Broom to repeat the process of grasping his palms back while swinging his arms wide. The strategy was to make the veins appear by moving the hands. He moved his arms as he was told. "We can see the veins." The plan worked. The executor injected him. The execution team buzzed as Broom screamed in agony, unable to withstand the liquid that was poured into him, and his veins burst. Once again, the IV failed. Broom was nervous. He began sobbing, triggered by the intense pain of a ruptured vein. The executioners, who still had to do their job, sat him on the bed. This time, the plan was to inject him in the leg. However, the injection was not into a vein, but into bone. Romell Broom screamed once again. He writhed in agony with further pain. He wanted to die and be relieved, but he couldn't. Normally, a drugging death penalty takes about 7 minutes, but in his case, it took more than 2 hours. He did not resist and continued to follow instructions, but his execution could not be carried out. Broom was injected a total of 18 times. Thus, his execution was called off and he was to be executed again at a later date. His lawyers, however, vehemently disagreed. The lawyers said trying to judge one crime twice is a violation of the Constitution. This has resulted in his death sentence being postponed indefinitely. March 16, 2016, the Supreme Court rejected the arguments of Broom's lawyers and allowed him to be executed for the second time. Court said the last time it was not up to the lethal injection of the drug. It was only in the preparatory stage. Thus, on June 17, 2020, his death sentence was carried out again. But here again, he avoided death. Drug companies refused to use their products and drugs were in short supply. Thus, the second death penalty was also postponed. Broom again escaped death. The date for the execution, which was postponed again, was set for March 16, 2022. But he did not die from this execution. The reason for this was like the whim of the Grim Reaper. He died before the execution. He died on December 28, 2020 from a coronavirus infection. He was 64 years old. Broom avoided execution, but his end was a simple one. People's fates are so unpredictable. You really can't predict when you're gonna die.